Now, let's move on to the main content, the definition and classification of acute leukemia. Acute leukemia, AL, is a clonal malignant disease of hematopoietic system, rapid onset, characterized by the first is the appearance of increased number of immature cells, principally in the bone marrow and blood, with extensive infiltration of liver, spleen, lymph nodes. The second is the impaired production of normal blood cells. The classification of AL is based on laboratory tests. The original classification scheme for AL was the French-American-British FAB system, which began as a purely morphological classification. The most recent modification of the classification of AL proposed by a World Health Organization (WHO) conference goes a step further, which takes into account both genetic and immunologic information. We call it MICM. The first M represents morphology. It's the appearance of cell under a microscope, same as FAB. I represents immunology. It's the antigen, also called cluster of differentiation, CD, present in the cell memory. C represents cytogenetics. It's the chromosome of the cell. The last M represents molecular biology. It's the gene mutation of the cell. According to the MICM, WHO divides AML into 4 broad categories, including the first is AML with genetic abnormalities. The second is AML with multilineage dysplasia infidity, such as involution from a myelodysplasia, MDS, or without accident MDS, but dysplasia in at least 50% of cells in 2 or more lineage. The third is AML secondary to therapy-related MDS, such as radiation alkylating agent related, topoisomerase II inhibitor related, and all others. The fourth is AML not otherwise categorized, which is the FAB classification from M0 to M7, and we can see that M2 is the most common subtype. Now, let's look at FAB classification of AML in more detail. M0 is the AML with minimal differentiation. The blast cells are granular cells, the percentage of which is at least 30%, medium-sized with a round or minimally indented nucleus. Myeloperoxidase, MPO positive cells are less than 3%. CD33 or CD13 is positive. M1 is the AML without maturation, the myeloblasts, type 1, which is without cytoplasmic granules, plus type 2, which is with little cytoplasmic granules, at least 90% of non-erythroid cells, NEC, which are the nucleated cells except the plasma cells, lymphocytes, tissue basophils, macrophages, and the nucleated erythroid. Large cells with a high nuclear and at least 3% of the blasts are MPO positive. M2 is the AML with maturation. Myeloblasts are 30 to 89% of NEC, with or without eosinophilic granules. M3 is the acute promyelocytic leukemia, APL. The promyelocytes are at least 30% of NEC, large atypical primary granules and a kidney-shaped nucleus. Branched or adherent aureoles are common. They are what the black arrows are. M4 is the acute myelomonocytic leukemia. There are at least 30% blasts, either myeloblasts, monoblasts, and or promonocytes of NEC. In addition to myeloblasts, black arrows, a significant monocytic components, blue arrows, can be seen, with monocytes and monocytic precursors more than 20%. M4 has a subtype, which is M4 with eosinophilia, called M4EO. It is characterized by the eosinophils, more than 5% of NEC, in addition to the M4. M5 is the acute monocytic leukemia. Monoblasts and promonocytes are at least 30%. Monoblasts, promonocytes, and monocytes are at least 80%. M5 is subdivided into M5A and M5B. Monoblasts greater than or equal to 80% is M5A. Less than 80% is M5B. M6 is the erythroid leukemia. Erythroblasts, the blue area, are at least 50%. The blasts, the black arrows, including the type 1 and the type 2, are at least 30% of NEC. M7 is the acute megakaryoblast leukemia. The megakaryoblast are at least 30%. Platelet peroxidase is positive. Human platelet antigen is positive. Similar to the FAB classification of AML, ALL can be divided into 3 classes, L1, L2, and L3 from the morphologic appearance of lymphocytes in the peripheral blood and marrow. With L1 disease, the lymphocytes are uniformly small with round nuclei, little cytoplasm, and inconspicuous nucleoli. L2 disease consists of large heterogeneous cells with more cytoplasma, irregular nuclei, and prominent nucleoli. Whereas L3 disease is characterized by large cells with abundant, deeply basophilic cytoplasm, round nuclei, and prominent nucleoli. The L1 form of ALL is more commonly seen in children, whereas the L2 form is more common in adults. These morphologic distinctions do not reliably differentiate between T and B cell ALL. According to the MICM, WHO divides ALL into T and B. We can see more details from the table on the right. Thank you.